Welcome to Chapter 6, where we shift our focus from grand theories to contemporary theories of everyday life. Unlike the macro level theories we studied in Chapter 5, this chapter examines micro level theories and how people create meaning in their daily lives. We'll explore several important theoretical perspectives that help us understand the intimate details of human social behavior. Our learning objectives for this chapter focus on understanding how people navigate everyday social situations. You'll learn to analyze Goffman's theatrical metaphor for social life, understand how ethnomethodologists study the taken for granted aspects of social reality, and see how exchange and rational choice theories explain social behavior. We'll also examine feminist perspectives on everyday interactions and how gender shapes microsocial experiences. These theories provide powerful tools for understanding the complexity and richness of daily social life. Today we'll explore 5 major approaches to understanding everyday life. We'll start with Goffman's dramaturgy, which views social life as theatrical performance. Then we'll examine ethnomethodology's focus on how people construct social reality in their everyday lives. We'll look at exchange theory's emphasis on rewards and cost and social behavior, rational choice theories focus on purposive action, and finally, feminist theory's insight into how gender shapes micro-level interactions. Each approach offers unique insights into the fabric of daily social life. Irving Goffman revolutionized our understanding of social interaction by using theater as a metaphor for social life. Unlike Herbert Bloomer's simple view of the self, Goffman argued that the self is not something possessed, but rather emerges from dramatic interactions. People are simultaneously actors, performing for others, and audience members watching others' performances. The concept of impression management is crucial. People constantly work to control the impressions others form of them. This theatrical approach helps us see how strategic and complex even ordinary social interactions really are. Goffman's spatial metaphor is one of his most powerful concepts. The front stage is where we perform for our audience, like a professor lecturing to students or a doctor examining patients. Here, we present idealized versions of ourselves. The backstage is where we can relax, drop our performance, and prepare, like a professor's office where they might admit uncertainty about a topic, or a hospital break room where doctors express frustration. The outside exists completely separate from the performance, like the professor at a basketball game, where their academic role is irrelevant. Understanding these spatial distinctions helps us see how people manage multiple identities and performances throughout their day. Goffman identified several key strategies people use to manage impressions. Dramaturgical loyalty means team members support each other's performances, like restaurant staff maintaining the illusion of efficiency even when the kitchen is chaotic. Dramaturgical discipline involves controlling facial expressions, avoiding verbal slips, and maintaining composure under pressure. Dramaturgical circumspection means planning ahead, selecting loyal team members, and preparing for emergencies. Teams work together to create convincing performances, and mystification involves keeping the audience from seeing how the performance is constructed, like magicians who never reveal their tricks or professors who don't let students see how much they have to prepare for each lecture. Role distance explains why people sometimes feel or seem detached from roles they're playing, like older children on a merry-go-round who act bored to show they're still too mature for such activities while enjoying the ride. Stigma involves the gap between who we're supposed to be and who we actually are. Everyone experiences stigma to some degree because no one perfectly matches social expectations. Discredited stigma involves visible differences like physical disabilities, while discreditable stigma involves hidden characteristics like past mental illness or family secrets. Goffman's analysis helps us understand how people manage potentially damaging information about themselves and how society creates categories of normal and deviant. Harold Garfinkel founded ethnomethodology to study something most sociologists ignore: the mundane, taken for granted methods people use to navigate everyday life. Unlike Durkheim, who treated social facts as external constraints, Garfinkel saw social facts as accomplishments that members of society continuously create through their practical activities. Ethnomethodology examines how people use common sense knowledge to make sense of situations, how they account for their actions, and how social reality emerges from these ongoing practical activities. This approach reveals the incredible complexity and skill involved in seemingly simple social interactions. Breaching experiments are ethnomethodology's most famous research methods. By deliberately violating social norms, researchers reveal the usually invisible methods people use to construct social reality. In the tic-tac-toe example, when someone marks between the lines instead of in the squares, it forces us to recognize that we take for granted a shared understanding of how to play tic-tac-toe. In the family experiment, where students acted like polite boarders in their homes, produce intense emotional reactions from family members, revealing how much we depend on shared assumptions about appropriate behavior. These experiments show that social reality is far more fragile and actively constructed than we usually realize. One of ethnomethodology's most significant contributions is showing how gender is accomplished rather than simply expressed. Garfinkel's study of Agnes, who was transitioning from male to female, revealed how much work goes into being a woman, learning appropriate gestures, speech patterns, clothing choices, and countless other practices. Agnes had to consciously learn what most women take for granted, revealing that gender is not a natural expression of biology, but a complex set of learned practices. This insight applies to all social categories. Being a student, a parent, a professional, or any other social identity requires ongoing accomplishment through appropriate practices. George Homans developed exchange theory by applying behavioral psychology principles to social behavior. His approach was deliberately reductionist. He believed complex social phenomenon could be explained through individual psychological principles. The success proposition explains why we repeat behaviors that have been rewarded. The stimulus proposition shows how we generalize from past experiences to new situations. The value proposition emphasizes that not all rewards are equal. We work harder for things we value more. The deprivation satiation principle explains why rewards lose value with repetition, and the aggression approval propositions explain emotional reactions to unexpected outcomes. Homan used these principles to explain everything from workplace dynamics to romantic relationships. Homan's illustrated exchange theory with workplace examples, like two office workers consulting each other for advice. Worker A asks worker B for help because it's been rewarded in the past, and worker B provides help because receiving thanks and approval is rewarding. Over time, they develop patterns of mutual assistance based on these exchanges. The theory explains how people learn to discriminate between appropriate and inappropriate situations for various behaviors, and how social relationships develop through ongoing exchanges of valued resources like help, companionship, recognition, and emotional support. While critics argue this reduces complex social life to simple calculations, exchange theory provides insights into patterns of social behavior. James Coleman developed rational choice theory to bridge micro and macro sociology. Unlike Homan's psychological focus, Coleman emphasized that actors are purposive. They have goals and make calculated decisions to achieve them. However, actors have different resources and face different constraints from social institutions. Coleman was particularly interested in aggregation mechanisms, how individual rational choices combine to create social patterns and outcomes. His methodological individualism means starting with individual actors and building up to explain larger social phenomena. This approach provides powerful tools for understanding everything from market behavior to educational achievement patterns. Coleman applied rational choice theory to many practical problems. His concept of social capital shows how relationships provide resources for achieving goals, like parents using social networks to find good schools for their children. He emphasized that the quality and quantity of available information significantly affects people's choices. Opportunity cost mean every choice involves giving up alternatives, and people must weigh these trade-offs. Institutional constraints like laws, organizational rules, and social norms limit the choices available to actors. Coleman believed rational choice theory should inform social policy, and he applied it to issues like school choice and education reform. While critics argue people do not always behave rationally, the theory provides valuable insights into patterns of social behavior. Lingerman and Neibrish brought feminist perspectives to microsociological analysis. They argue that conventional theories often assume equality in interactions, missing how power differentials based on gender, race, and class shape everyday encounters. Feminist theory reveals how structured inequalities are enacted and reinforced through micro level interactions. Rather than viewing interactions as neutral encounters between equals, feminist analysis shows how power differentials create different experiences for participants. This perspective illuminates aspects of everyday life that other micro theories often overlook. Feminist research also reveals distinctive characteristics of women's microsocial experiences. Incidentalism describes how women's lives are often organized around responding to others' needs rather than pursuing their own linear goals, like mothers whose schedules revolve around children's activities or women who interrupt their careers to care for aging parents. Women are more oriented toward facilitating other success rather than pursuing their own individual projects. This happens because gender inequality is continuously enacted through micro interactions where women are expected to be more responsive, supportive, and accommodated. Notice it says women are expected to be more responsive, supportive, and accommodating. It doesn't necessarily mean we are. Even when individual women achieve success, they often face structural subordination through countless small interactions that reinforce traditional gender expectations. Dorothy Smith's concept of bifurcated consciousness is one of feminist theory's most important contributions to understanding women's everyday experiences. Women often experience a fault line between their actual lived experience and the official social reality that doesn't reflect or validate those experiences. For example, a working mother might experience the reality of juggling multiple responsibilities, while official workplace culture assumes workers don't have family obligations. This creates a type of consciousness that's constantly aware of the gap between personal experience and social expectations. Women develop various strategies to survive this contradiction, but it creates ongoing psychological and practical challenges that men typically do not face. Feminist theorists have revised George Herbert Mead's concept of the generalized other to reflect women's more complex social reality. While Mead assumed women internalize a unified set of community expectations, feminists show that women must navigate multiple, sometimes contradictory generalized others. The dominant generalized other reflects male-dominated cultural norms, but women also create alternative meaning systems and communities that offer different definitions of appropriate behavior. This creates tension, as women must balance conformity to dominant expectations with resistance and the creation of alternative meanings. Understanding this helps explain why women's behavior often seems more complex and contradictory than traditional theories suggest. Feminist research reveals how gender inequality is enacted through countless micro-level interactions. Studies show men typically take up more physical space in mixed-gendered settings, interrupt women more frequently, and receive more eye contact and attention. Women do more emotional labor, managing others' feelings, facilitating conversations, and maintaining relationships. These patterns seem natural, but actually reflect and reinforce structural gender inequality. Each individual interaction might seem insignificant, but collectively they create and maintain larger patterns of gender subordination. Understanding these micro processes helps us see how structural inequality is reproduced through everyday behavior. These contemporary theories offer different lenses for understanding everyday life. Dramaturgy helps us see the strategic and performative aspects of social interaction. Ethnomethodology reveals the normally invisible work people do to create social reality. Exchange theory explains behavioral patterns through rewards and cost. Rational choice theory focuses on goal-oriented decision making and how individual choices aggregate into social outcomes. Feminist theory illuminates how power differentials shape everyday experiences. Rather than competing explanations, these theories complement each other by highlighting different aspects of the complex process of everyday social life. These theories have contributed important methodological innovations to sociology. Goffman pioneered detailed participant observation of natural social settings, providing rich descriptions of impression management strategies. Garfinkel's breaching experiments reveal hidden aspects of social construction. Conversation analysis examines the detailed structure of everyday talk. Case studies like Agnes show how social categories are accomplished. These approaches emphasize qualitative methods focused on understanding meaning and interpretation rather than just measuring behavior. These methodological contributions have influenced sociology far beyond the specific theories that developed them. These theories remain highly relevant for understanding contemporary social life. Social media has created new venues for impression management and dramaturgical performance. People carefully curate their online personas. Digital communication changes interaction patterns and creates new forms of social reality construction. Understanding workplace dynamics requires attention to impression management, exchange relationships, and power differentials. Consumer behavior reflects rational choice processes as people weigh cost and benefits. Identity politics involves the construction and maintenance of group identities through ongoing social processes. These classic theories provide tools for analyzing current social phenomena. These theories have both significant strengths and important limitations. Their strength lies in providing rich, detailed understanding of social interaction and revealing the complexity of everyday life. They've generated practical applications and methodological innovations that have advanced society. However, they may have overemphasized individual agency while giving insufficient attention to larger structural forces like economic systems or political institutions. Some approaches assume people engage in rational calculation when behavior may be more emotional or habitual. There's also risk of reducing complex social life to overly simple mechanisms. The best sociological analysis combines insight from these micro level theories with attention to the macro level structures and processes. As we conclude this chapter on contemporary theories of everyday life, several key takeaways emerge. First, social interaction is far more complex and strategic than it initially appears. People are constantly managing impressions, constructing reality, and navigating power relationships. Second, social reality is actively constructed through ongoing practices rather than simply existing as external constraints. Third, factors like gender, race, and class create different experiences of everyday life that traditional theories often overlook. Fourth, multiple theoretical lenses are needed to capture the full complexity of social interaction. Finally, micro-level processes connect to larger social patterns. Everyday interactions both reflect and reproduce broader social structures. Understanding social life requires attention to both human agency and structural constraints. Let's conclude with some questions for reflection and discussion. Think about how you manage impressions differently when you're with family, friends, professors, or employers. What assumptions do you take for granted in everyday interactions? Assumptions that might become visible if they were violated? Consider how you weigh costs and benefits in your relationship and social choices. Reflect on how factors like gender, race, or social class might affect your daily interactions in ways you don't usually notice. Finally, consider how social media and digital communication have changed the nature of social performance and impression management. These questions can help you apply the theoretical insights from this chapter to your own everyday experiences, thus making the connection between abstract sociological concepts and lived social reality.